Hello, everyone, and welcome to our continuation of the series. And today, we are going to be talking about data sharing and marketplace. I am Ruthie Senanayaka, and I have been with Blueprint for a couple of years now. I'm on the marketing team here, and I get to introduce you to Eric Vogelpohl. Eric is going to give us a quick introduction about himself as well. But before that, I wanted to let you know, if you have any questions throughout this series, or throughout this session, I should say, feel free to just add them into the comments below. We will be sure to answer them as they come through. So you can add them in there. And if you have a question that you would like answered off the screen, you can also email us at info@bpcs.com, and we'll be sure to connect with you there. We still have a couple more of these sessions to add it on to our series that you can always hop onto. We go live on Wednesdays at noon, so you can hop onto our LinkedIn page to sign up and get a notification for that. You can also connect with us on our website. Just go to bpcs.com, and you can take a look at the events on there as well. But without further ado, I will pass things along to Eric.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Ruthie. Appreciate everybody being here. Eric Vogelpohl. So I've been with Blueprint quite a long time now. So I have tech strategy responsibilities across the company overall. But most of my focus and my passion is on the data side. So I work with a lot of our data architects and data engineers and our solution architects, and we come up with patterns, platforms, and practices all around the Databricks and the Lakehouse and the Spark ecosystem, uh, pretty much exclusively. Though when we need to support clients with other data estates, we can as well. So happy to be pitching in for this workshop. This workshop is all around really a subject and a half. They're really kind of combined. This is all around delta sharing or data sharing generically, but using the delta sharing protocol that the Databricks team and the Spark team and the Delta Apache team at large have contributed to the open source community. So, just for terminology's sake, I'm going to probably make a mistake and say Databricks when sometimes I mean to just say the open source version of the Delta sharing protocol, because the Delta sharing protocol, while it supports Databricks and some internal communication, which we'll get to, it's really designed for the open source community that has built its lakehouse in Spark and uses the Delta protocol or the Delta file format. It's really designed for them to share that storage en masse globally. So if I make that mistake, I apologize. We're going to focus on Delta sharing. So let's go ahead and dig in. Just for quick orientation's sake, I happen to be in Databricks. I could be in an open source version of Spark, and we could be doing a Delta sharing workshop using the pure open source components of Delta sharing. I chose not to. It's nice to just do this in Databricks, which also supports Delta sharing. Just because I have a lot of data here and it's got a nice rich UI and it just makes for a better demo experience. So let's talk about a couple of things that we want to accomplish today. And they really work along these just kind of prime use cases, if you will. So when I think of data sharing and when I talk to the customers that we work with on their data sharing desires and goals, I can generally categorize them into basically three high level categories. So one is just building a partner ecosystem. And I've just listed, I don't know, 7, 8 bullets here. So retail, sharing data, and public safety and supply chain, academia, all these pursuits. And there's lots of these marketplaces, and other cloud vendors have these marketplaces as well. But you as an organization, data is your asset. And if you think about either trimmed down versions or selected down versions of your internal data sets as benefiting your suppliers, your consumers, maybe even your competitors. I used to work in the oil and gas space years ago, and there were many of a consortium that get together, bringing engineers and pipeline experts from a lot of the competitors with whom I've worked. And we would work on standards and we would work on data schemas, et cetera. So sharing is a way to kind of further the community. And one of the mechanical ways we can do that is just data sharing. So that's in the partner ecosystem. We could go on for hours on that one. The second is, a greedy approach. Your data is a valuable asset. It's valuable to you. It may be more so, have a greater premium with respect to somebody else, maybe an upstream provider, somebody who provides you services, or maybe augmenting a product or service you have for the consumer. So there are monetization techniques, and we'll talk about a couple little tricks and tips that we can do with Delta sharing to light up some potential data monetization techniques where you can just simply sell your data or trade it. Or maybe you are, or maybe you're a retail B2C organization and you've negotiated a 2% discount with supplier XYZ if you give them sales through information, or maybe some scrubbed competitive information that's ethically and responsibly shared. These are great trades that you can make with respect to your data. Delta sharing can support that. And then finally, this one gets a little bit sophisticated. There's really kind of two steps here. One is the internal piece. So Delta sharing, in addition to it being the protocol used to do global, worldwide, ecosystem and monetization goals, it's also the mechanism that Databricks uses internally to create mesh networks, if you will. I'm just going to borrow that kind of in vogue term right now, where say region 1 and region 2, separated by a hemisphere, can share portions of their data that maybe they otherwise couldn't do because of compliance reasons or just because of huge organizational boundaries. So the internal sharing mechanism between Databricks and Databricks is powered by Delta sharing as well. We won't demonstrate a lot of that today because it really just looks like what a normal Databricks Unity Catalog environment looks like. And we're going to see Unity Catalog today anyway. So it's not that big of a bang for the buck. But in addition to that, if you watched the Data and AI Summit this year, I think it was in June. If not, it's available on on YouTube. I would encourage you to go take a look and see what Databricks is doing with these clean rooms. So these concepts where I can have this kind of demilitarized zone of trusted compute and data, and I can fulfill certain like data transparency rules. Maybe there's an M&A project going on. There's a secret project, and we have these trusted brokered authorities that are allowed to participate in a clean room. I'm not doing this service the justice it needs to have, but take a look at some of the clean room material, and we'll talk about this in a future workshop. That too has a lot of dependency upon Delta sharing. So I've spoken so long here. I have a stingy cluster timeout, so let me start my cluster again. Okay, Ruthie, I'm going to stop there. If there's any questions just on the high level whys, what are the use cases? What are the major categories of Delta sharing before I jump into kind of how the protocol works, and then of course the demo. So if we have any questions, or if there's anything in the pop-up that I'm not seeing because I don't have that screen in front of me, let me know.
Sounds good. At the moment, we don't have anything, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to add them into the comments, and I'll let you know, Eric.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so I'm gonna scroll down. And again, I don't know if I've completed my thought, but from a navigation perspective, I am in Databricks. I'm in a notebook. For all workshops that I deliver, I practice the no PowerPoints allowed, though I cheat because I put a lot of PowerPoint-like material directly into my notebook, which you can do in Databricks quite easily with Markdown. So we'll just keep sliding on just in a normal notebook. We'll get to the code in a minute. So let's unpack what Delta sharing is doing. So two sides of the world, pretty simple. You're either a provider or you're a recipient. And for the most part, it's a read-only direction from left to the right, from the provider to the recipient. And on the provider side, if you are in Databricks, you already have the two fundamental pieces in place. In other words, your data need to be in Delta, the Delta format, which has been the common format for Databricks for a long time. So you have your data obviously just stored in Parquet, but because Delta kind of wraps around it and provides it a lot of Meta and some additional capabilities. We now just call them the Delta table. So your data are in Delta table, easy, no problem. It's a prerequisite to be in the Unity catalog anyway. And then a second, of course, I just gave it away, is the Unity catalog itself. And we're going to see what the catalog is like. The Unity catalog is an environment, it's a layer over top or within Databricks that provides unified security, unified views, a unified catalog, of course, tagging and access control policies and security trimming and a bunch of other features. And they just keep rolling in more, all within the Unity catalog layer. But with respect to Delta sharing, the Unity catalog also comes with the second component that's necessary to be a data provider, and that's this little, just say an authorization server. There's not really anything that you have to do. It comes along for the ride. So as long as your data are in Delta and you have Unity catalog, you are ready to become a data provider. And essentially the protocol works as follows. You on the right side of this page, by the way, we've talked about a handful of these use cases, but they're pretty obvious. You with any of these clients, so let's just say, we'll pick on Power BI. You're a Power BI consumer. And you want to get access to data that are in somebody else's Databricks environment or somebody else's OpenStack environment that happens to be compatible with Delta sharing. So again, it doesn't have to be Databricks, could be any open environment where you run, you have Delta and you have the services that power the protocol. All you really need is a URL. You get sent an activation URL. It's a one-time use URL. We'll actually see it here. That's kind of step one. So you've been defined a recipient, and through some secure channel, maybe a secure email or some other encrypted service, somebody has passed you a secret URL. That URL opens up a quick little web page, and it lets you download essentially a token file. And inside that file is really nothing more than a token and a URL to the actual data on storage where that table is being shared from. So that's one of the huge benefits. You think about it conceptually, it's one of the huge benefits of Delta sharing. And that's that from the point of view of the provider. So if you're Databricks and you're in Databricks and you're a Databricks Delta sharing provider, you can give access at cloud scale directly to the storage account on which your Delta table lives. So if your Delta table live on S3 or ADLS Gen 2 in Azure or GCS, so cloud storage and Google, when I invoke my URL, when I invoke the URL that's contained inside that file that I get from that one-time use connection, I'm actually creating an API call directly to that storage. So all the compute on the provider side could literally go to sleep. It could be 2 a.m. And you in Power BI are consuming data directly and extremely secure method directly off of the storage account that represents the table object that you've been given rights to. That token can be revoked, it can have a timeout, etc. Or I can just simply monitor the logs. And at some point when our sharing agreement has ended, I just drop you from being a recipient. And the next time you open Power BI, you pick up that file and you knock on the door of the authorization service and you say, hi, I want one of those short-lived URLs directly to that storage account. Of course, it all happens behind the scenes. You don't see any of that. And because you've been dropped as a recipient or your token has been revoked or has timed out, you don't have access anymore. And that's it. You just simply delete that temporary file if you want because it has no value going forward. All this is done with zero replication. So again, if you're at some separate company, we'll actually demo this today. If you're at a separate company and you're running Power BI and you've been given the ability to get access to somebody's Delta share, you do it at query time. So you make a query or you do an extraction, it comes directly off of their Delta Lake as the data are at the state that it's processed. So if it's a streaming table, that's fine. You get the data net of the most recent action that was performed on that Delta table, and away you go. You have access to it. You don't have to replicate it, create a table unto yourself. da 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 da. Though if you'd like, you certainly can. That's why you see some logos here that support ETL or ELT. We'll just say ETL in this case, off of a Delta sharing protocol. If you truly do want to just integrate and extract the data from the provider, you're more than welcome to do that. So, and finally, we can cross clouds. So all of these cloud vendors, and the brilliance behind Delta sharing, is that every one of these cloud vendors, their storage subsystem, so ADLS for Azure, S3 for AWS, and GCS for GCP, every one of those object stores has agreed to this kind of self-signed, short-lived URL access directly to your table on storage once you're authorized to gain access to it. So that is how the protocol works. And at this point, Ruthie, if there's no questions, we're going to actually watch this function in real life. We're going to set up a scenario here. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. So we're going to scroll down in our notebook. And here we go. We're going to be Acme Incorporated. We are a Databricks company. That's you and me. And we have 2 consumers. And I actually have this running in a VM. So there's nothing up my sleeve here. There's no additional security. This is an individual running directly off of a VM. And Maria is a data scientist. She's going to open Jupyter. She has Pandas installed. She has Python, of course, and maybe even Plotly. And we're going to send her a link to activate her temporary, key. She can get access to the tables we get her access to, and she's going to do some analysis on some flight data. And then we have another individual. I've not named this guy. That's okay. And he's going to open Power BI, and he's going to use the same link, except we're going to actually get the file, some information out of the file, and we're going to make Power BI do the same analysis, just a completely different tool. I'm going to run out of time today if we try to do Delta sharing examples with every one of the clients you see their logo for. But at some point, a developer would look at this list, and this list is not even exhaustive. They would say, at this point, Delta sharing is a first-class protocol client for the most part, anything that I would build or anything that I would use in the data space. I personally don't know what primitive, low-level languages or major tools at this point are missing. Even Databricks notes that since the protocol is so extremely well documented, most implementations take a week or 2 to write a client. And you could just add to the community. Again, it's open source, so find it on GitHub. Okay, now we're going to do this demo in 2 approaches. We're going to take the UI approach so that you can see what Unity Catalog looks like. I hear from a lot of clients, they say, what is Unity Catalog? I don't get it. Is it just a catalog? Is it a list of things? No, it's much more than that. So we're going to take the UI approach because it'll force you to see what Unity Catalog is like. And then for the gearheads on the call, we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're actually going to use code. We'll just use SQL code in this case, though if you prefer to work with command line utilities or API utilities, all of the same capability you have for creating shares and recipients and all the other things we want to do in this demo, you can do that with those languages as well. I just think it's easier to stick with just SQL for the command side. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the UI approach. We'll stay the pure UI approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually duplicate this tab. That way I can go back and forth. And we're going to jump over here to the catalog. You may notice from documentation that this used to be called data, this pane right here, this 3rd or 4th one down. In the new UI structure, this used to be called data. Made no sense to me. This should have always been called the catalog. Databricks must have heard a webinar I was on, and sure enough, they named it catalog. So at least in my tenant, this is called catalog. And you can see we have a list of catalogs available to us. Catalog in the Unity catalog space is the top level of your data structure. So I have things like, a workshop. This is where I do a lot of workshops from. So I have a catalog called workshops. And as you would expect, inside of workshops, I have the database icon because that's the 2nd level down in the Unity hierarchy. So catalog number 1. The database or the schema, they're the same thing, is level 2. So in this case, I have data. And now I'm on the 3rd level. They've just put functions and tables and models and a few other things in their own grouping. But really the 3rd level down is, of course, the table itself. So catalog, database or schema, then table. These are the individual objects that we're going to add things to. So this is kind of how I view the world of the data that I want to share. So that's in this top catalog navigation of the Unity catalog pane. So we don't want to be here just yet. We want to come down to Delta Share. So in this case, I'm going to start over from scratch. I created one called Flight Share. That's not fair. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the share. We're going to start from scratch. And my teammates have some shares in place. I'll keep them there. That's fine, but we're not going to use them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a recipient. I think that's the step that I've put down. Yep. So we've navigated through Unity Catalog. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a recipient, and we want to go ahead and copy their activation link that they get, and we want to send it to them right away, right? Because it kind of sits there as a recipient and does nothing until they've activated it. So that's step 2 for us. Let's go do that. All right. So we're going to click New Recipient, and I don't know, we're going to call this Partner Co. And this is Maria G. And if we do this again, we'll call it 1. This next field is for Databricks to Databricks sharing only. We're not doing Databricks to Databricks sharing, so we don't need it. And always put a comment. We always want to comment and say, this is for, Maria Gutierrez or Rodriguez, or what I think her name is Rodriguez in this demo, at, company Partner Co. Her email is, at partnerco.com. Sure, fine. And that's a nice comment that we can add. All right, so we've created our recipient, and the authorization tool is saying, okay, fair enough. This recipient link, it's now copied, and it needs to go to this individual in some trusted fashion, because it obviously contains a secret. So whatever that trusted fashion is for you, it could be email, could be encrypted, could be Slack, could be Teams, however you communicate with this partner. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to say, okay. And I'm going to bring up my virtual machine, and I'm going to open a web browser. You can see here now I'm over in a just a Windows PC, running on my Mac, but I've just got a Windows PC here. And we're going to go ahead and initiate that link. And if you notice in Databricks right now, this is still in a kind of a pending status because this individual hasn't yet authorized their link. They've not used it yet. So we're going to open up Chrome. Let's see here, I need to change some settings on my VM if it's not cooperating. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to paste that link in. And sure enough, about before, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to offer me the ability to download my credential file. I need to download this credential file. This is a one-time action. And when I download this credential file, again, it contains the URL that I'll use for future authorizations, and it'll contain my token. I will not have the ability to do this again. So it's giving you some verbiage here. So I'm going to go ahead and click download. And sure enough, it just went into my normal Edge download folder, which is fine. Now, I know that's true because if I come back, sure enough, the Databricks page that you see here that I'm on now, I'm now a provider, it just switched to activated. So I can no longer get the link. That link is gone. That link has been consumed. So let's take a look at this point in the game. Let's pretend that, again, Maria is going to use pandas. And she's going to use pandas in a first-class data science environment. So for me, that's going to be a Jupyter Notebook. I don't need the browser anymore. So I'm going to open up this Jupyter Notebook. And now you are the persona Maria Rodriguez. And she has pre-created just enough code necessary to get Delta sharing running on her side of the world. So she has no accounts in Databricks. She's not a member of your Active Directory or your AWS directory at all. The only thing she has is that recipient grant. And that came by way of that file that was downloaded to her. So all I'm doing here is saying, hey, in the same path as my notebook, I'm also going to save that file, which I need to do. I need to get that out of my downloads directory. And then I'm going to use, in this case, the Delta sharing client and say, go ahead and build a client directly off of that config file, the config share file. And then when you're done, list me all the tables that Maria has access to. So if we do this correctly, and I've got some output from my last run, and I'll clear that, we should get nothing yet. Because at this point, we haven't defined a share, and we certainly haven't granted her permission to it. So we should either get an error or there are no tables shared to her. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to go grab that downloads file. I come back here to my browser and find out where that went. Okay, config share. I'm going to copy this file. I'm going to copy it out of my downloads for right now. Maybe this should go in a very secret location. I'm going to put it in dev projects, and I'm going to put it right there. As I said in my notebook code, the config file is assumed to be in the location as my notebook. Probably not the world's best practice because, again, this contains a secret. So maybe this should be in a secret location, but for this demo, that's fine. Okay, now I have everything I need to run this. It knows that the file is local, and we're going to go ahead and import the client and run it. So I'm just going to hit Command Enter. It's going to interrogate that file, and sure enough, when I told it to run list all tables, it dutifully did, and it says you have absolutely no tables access to you, but I have confirmed that your recipient code works fine and it's within its token limit, and the world is good. So I'm going to put this down for just a second. We're going to come back to Databricks, and we're going to continue the setup. So we've already created the share. We sent them the activation link, and they have activated it. The next thing we need to do is create a share. So Delta sharing is predicated upon creating a share, then adding assets and recipients to it. So the next thing we want to do is just simply create a share. So I'm going to come back to Delta sharing and Delta sharing in the Unity catalog. We're just going to create a share, and we're just going to call it all flights data. It's good enough. Flights data shared with our partner co. Good enough. So we say okay. And as I just mentioned, a share is made up of two things: the recipient we have and the assets we want to add into the share. So let's add the recipient first. So we'll add the recipient that we just created. And I think it was this one, Maria G. Should have been Maria R, but that's okay. All right, so we have a recipient. We know that's there because it's there. And we need to add some assets. So we're going to manage assets. We'll add tables. And I'm going to scroll down to my workshop catalog and bust open my database. And let's say, we'll pick this one. I think that's the table that I want. Yeah. Flights, on-time performance, and this is a clean table or a silver table. We're good to go. So we'll say save. So at this point, I have one table and I have one recipient, and that should be the only thing I need to do. So let's jump back over to Maria's environment and assume we've just picked up the phone and we've called Maria and we said, Maria, we've just seen that you've activated your URL. Congratulations. You have a valid claim against our authorization service. And I have, upon your request, added our flights data to it. So I'm going to tell her, go ahead and rerun your code. You shouldn't change anything. And hopefully, sure enough, we now have access to a table. And that's exactly what she has access to. So now Maria on her side can continue doing normal things. In the pandas world, there's one slightly different way of creating a data frame. Instead of like read CSV or something like that, we just have this interesting little creation of a string where I concatenate both the file that contains my access to the authorization server and my key, as well as the flight that I want to share. Now, I'm going to have an error if I run this. And if you're eagle eye, you're going to see why I'm going to have that error. And sure enough, in a previous demo, I called it flight share.data.table name. And this time, as we can see, I called it flights data. So I want to go in and fix that, because to build this connection string, I need to do share.schema.table. So I could even just double click this, say copy that, and replace that with flights.data.table name. All looks good. Let's go ahead and run that cell. And this point, the client, the Delta sharing client, is contacting the authorization server. It's knocking on the door. It's saying, I have a valid claim. And it says, yes. And it says, I want this table. The authorization server is saying, these tables, or this table set of files, is located directly at this cloud storage, hands me back that secret short-lived URL. And at this point, I am building a data frame. I just said data frame. I'm building a pandas data frame complete with that information. So this is going to be quite large. I should have probably limited this down, did this on purpose. So I'm going to interrupt this because this is doing something like 160 million row get. So I'm going to pause this for right now. I'm going to go ahead and interrupt that command. And I'm going to show you a nice little handy feature where I can say limit, we'll say 100 rows. This is no different than select everything from table, limit 100. So I'm going to go ahead and rerun everything in this notebook again. Doesn't matter that I'm restarting the client. Okay, now we've limited just the return to the 100 rows. And I've asked Maria to perform some analysis on flights, and she used Plotly, and she created a very nice plot on, in this case, the first 100 rows were only American Airlines, but there you go. Let's see what this looked like if we did the first, I don't know, say 10,000 rows. We'll just hit refresh on this. It shouldn't take more than a couple seconds, 3 seconds to get 10,000 rows. Again, because we're coming off of cloud storage. I'm not needing to mount any compute, and I'm not needing to do any type of an ODBC setup. I'm literally mounting storage to get access to this. That's why it's so fast. I'm going to refresh my Plotly command, and it looks like in this case I'm still looking at American Airlines data, but that's fine. Let's see if we can get a little bit more. Maybe we'll add another 0 into that number and see if we can make the graph look a little bit better. There we go. Okay, now we've got more airlines and everything works great. So at this point, she could save the file. She could just continue to use it in this mode. If I updated the file, she'd have all the access she could possibly want to the most recent version. Not only that, but because we have the power of time travel in Databricks, and it's a function of Delta, I can actually give her the ability, I'm not going to do it here, but I could give her the ability to define a version number and say, hey, the version number or the timestamp of when I wanted that flights data was before you ran an update this morning. So maybe she and I are on the phone. I'm the provider, she's the recipient. And she's like, wow, you guys, you overwrote something, or I'm getting different values. I'm a data scientist. I can't have that. I need things to be consistent. And I can say, fine, with the power of Databricks Snapshot, why don't you just go back to when the version was as of, I don't know, it's probably 2023 dash whatever it is, 09 something something, and then a timestamp. And she would get the Delta table version as of that snapshot. And she can continue her workload for purposes of ensuring her results just with that data. If she wants just the latest version again, then she just comes back to the default latest version, and away we go. I will also add that one final tweak. There was a nice addition added by the folks and the Delta sharing team, where not only she can get the fresh data, she can also get snapshot data. She can also get the change data feed. So this is obviously not the code. I'm just kind of writing it out here for notes for the recording. But if she and I wanted to negotiate that not only do I share the data, but I also share the change data feed, the change capture feed that comes off of the Delta table, she can actually see the adds, removes, and changes that are applied to the table when we update it for her. So she has all the possible variations of that flights table that she can possibly want to do the downstream work she needs to do. So I'm going to stop there, Ruthie. That was one half of the demonstration. We set up how to create a share, how to create a recipient, how to create the activation link, how to add the assets to the share, and then consumed it as if we're a data scientist somewhere on the other side of the world. Any questions or any notes?
Nothing at the moment, but just a quick reminder, if anyone does have questions, just to add them into the comments.
All right, sweet. Okay. So if this screen plays well for me, I am having a little bit of trouble with this remote desktop and where my mouse is landing. Let's see if we can do the same thing in Power BI, and we'll show what that first class environment is like. So reminder, here's the file that we downloaded. I'm going to do a quick open with, we'll just say open with, and we'll open this with Visual Studio Code, fine. There's really nothing secret about this file. Again, all this file is a little JSON script that contains the bearer token, the actual token itself that authorizes you, and then the authorization endpoint. And for Power BI, I don't know why, frankly, the Power BI experience doesn't work like the Pandas experience, where it can just interrogate this file and pull out what it needs. It doesn't. I think the connector for Power BI still requires you to select out the two components at once, the Power BI connector. So much like if this were a SQL server, you would need to know the ODBC link and all the parameters to ODBC. Then you would need a username and password. Very similar. We need to pluck out of this file just that URL. So I'm going to copy that. We'll jump into Power BI. And we'll open this up and we'll say get data, and we'll get data from the Delta sharing connector. You know, Power BI is like they're all connector based. So we'll do a get data experience here. And instead of searching, I'll just start typing Delta sharing. Sure enough, there it comes. And it may try to default to the one that I have loaded. No, good. Okay, so the first thing it's saying is saying, hey, inside that file that you downloaded, you'll have a URL. And sure enough, we do. There's the URL that I cracked open from that file. I don't need to add anything here, though I could. I may want to just say limit it so we don't get ourselves into that same endless long-running million record thing. We'll say okay. Then I think the next thing it's going to say is, great, with this, I need a bearer token if I don't already have one. Nope, I think I need to clear my credentials. So let me do that real fast. With Power BI, as you Power BI pros know, there are times when it saves its credentials. So it saved the token from the last time I used a similar link. And we want to kill all that. We want to delete all those things. I'm just going to go get rid of all the ones that I've cached over the months. And let's try this experience again. Now, hopefully this time it asks me for the bearer token, and it does because I've nuked the credentials that it had pre-saved, and my bearer token is also in that file. So we'll highlight all of this. We will hit copy, jump back to Power BI, paste, and connect. And hopefully I get the exact same catalog, schema, and table that I did when I was in Pandas, and we do. So at this point, it's probably not a good practice for Maria to share her config file. Her config file is her config file. She's the trusted recipient. If the recipient was named, doesn't have to be named. It could be an organization's recipient key, I suppose. Though for auditing purposes, it's probably not a good practice. But in this case, we did the exact same analysis that she was doing in Pandas. We just did in Power BI. Okay, so we've got 20 minutes left. Let's blaze through the exact same experience with Delta sharing using the coded method instead of the non-coded method. For those folks out there that think about using this in a declarative workflow, and obviously you don't want to touch the UI. So we don't need this environment anymore because this would just result in the same demo. So let's get rid of that. We'll come back to our environment. So we're done with the SQL approach. I'm sorry, we're done with the UI approach. Let's go to the SQL approach. So again, what we would do, step one, same thing, create a recipient, send them the link. So in this case, I'm in a cell because I'm in a Python orientated notebook. I need to declare the magic SQL so that I can do SQL here, which I've done. And then step one, all I'm doing is saying, hey, create recipient if they don't exist. And I'm going to call this one, I don't know, partner co, Maria R, we'll do it 2, MR2, I'll remember that. Same note, she's a data scientist, here's her email address. And then notice I added a little bit of a property. This is something that's cool. We'll get into this in just a second on why I added that. So in this case, we want to alter the recipient. Need to make certain that I use the right recipient name. And we want to give that recipient object a couple key value pair properties. So in this case, countries US, partner ID. And then this one's interesting. Talk about monetization. So I just came up with an arbitrary ID called access cost rate ID. So imagine at our company, we could have a table of costs to access data. Maybe some data are more premium than others. Maybe some users come at a cheaper incented price. We can, at the actual object level, in this case, the recipient, define a key value pair that we can query on when we see the log data, which we'll get to. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And it should say, okay, that we created a recipient. And we tagged it with the information that we wanted to tag it with. It's running, and sure enough, we say, okay, now I've put some companion things in this notebook. So one thing that we want to do is we need to make certain that we get Maria her new link. So let's just go do this. Let's go ahead and describe that recipient. So for those in the open SQL world, you know that show commands and describe commands are very popular and common. They give you the details, the meta details about the object in question. And just like with Unity Share, there's a whole group of show and describe commands. So in this case, we'll describe recipient. And of course, we've got to get the name right. So she is at Partner Co. and she is MR2. And we're going to run this, and I'm going to get an error, and I'm going to get an error because I didn't declare my cell to be in SQL orientation. Now that I did, I have that special link. This is the most important step. I have this link. It's available just one time. If I use this link right now, I hit paste, and I use this link, and I download the file, forget about it, it's done. I've used it. When I rerun this command and I scroll down, I no longer see the link. It's been claimed. So again, that's a big troubleshooting issue that you need to know. Okay, so we've got the recipient defined. Let's create a share. Number 2, remember, shares are made up of recipients and assets. So creating a share couldn't be easier. Create share flight. I think I've got this one already, so I'll say 2. And we gave it a comment. And sure enough, it comes back and says, hey, here's all the response information I got when I created your share, and your share is good, no problem, no errors. And again, just like before, we have describe and show and a bunch of other useful commands. And at this point, I have an asset. It does not have, I have a share. It has no recipient. It has no assets. So let's add them. So I've broken this one into 2 steps. Actually, I have to spell it right. So I think, I've broken this into 2 steps. Let me break this down step by step. So we have the share called flight share 2, and we're going to run a remove command. And this remove command is probably going to fail on us because it's going to say something like, you didn't have this one here. There's no table to remove. You're okay. So I'm going to go ahead and nuke that out. And I'm going to add an asset. So let's uncomment the comments that I added. See if this works. So we want to alter the share, share 2. That's what I called it successfully up here. I did flight share 2. Yep. Flight share 2. We want to add table, workshop data, flights on time, gave it a comment. In this case, I've also given it a partition. This runs correctly. It did. Now, this partition's interesting. So we've got enough time here. What I've done is I've said for Maria, hey, this table is gigantic. During the first time I set up your Delta share, I didn't put any type of filter on it. And Pandas specifically on her side, Pandas doesn't yet have the ability to pass like a where clause, where year equal current year or something like that. Other implementations, the Delta share can't. So if you're, say, loading it up in Spark or loading it up in some development tool that uses JSON, et cetera, there are predicates that you can define and you can work with the Delta share a little bit better. In this case, you cannot here. So what I've done when I created the share is I just partitioned it for her. So I said the year equal last year, or I can say the year equal just this year. And I've given her the ability to use history as well. So hopefully if I rerun this, it will update. It's already existing. Let me go ahead and remove it. Alter share 2, remove, We'll go ahead and rerun this. So now it just updated the table. Now when she queries that table, because I've declared a partition offset of just year equal 2023, the table is partitioned by year, she will only get access to 2023 data. So she doesn't have to deal with that clumsy example that I gave you before, where it's either the whole table or I have to figure out what my limit is on my side. I hope in the future that all first-class utilities of Delta sharing have filtering capabilities, but for right now, at least the Pandas piece that I demonstrated earlier doesn't. So there you go. We've created the assets. Now we will grant her the rights to that share. So we'll come back up and get her name, or at least her recipient name. And to share 2, we want to add the recipient. We run the command and find. There's a couple other related commands. There's show grants as well. And we're good. Now, any questions at this point, Ruthie, before I jump to the final section of Delta sharing?
Nothing yet.
All right, great. Okay, so now come the fun part. We've actually had Maria in Pandas and Power BI doing some analysis on the previous share that I created, whatever it was called, flight share. So it should be at this point be in the log. So what I wrote the other night was a quick log view and say, hey, let's hit the new Databricks audit log. This is the main audit log that's inside Databricks. Let's go ahead and look for this. We're going to sort by event date, and we want to see the share name, and we want to see the share table and the recipient name, and just give me the first portion of the user agent, which is what her application would respond to, of saying that's what she was using. In this case, it was Power BI and Python or Pandas, and I'm going to call that the actual access client. From the table, notice I've got some where clauses. You can see these. There is a column in the access audit table called service name. All Delta sharing folds into the Unity catalog service name, and all actions will start with Delta sharing. So if you want to see all Delta sharing logs, the only thing you need are essentially that component of the query, and you will see all entries for the Delta sharing activity. So you'll see recipient created, assets assigned, recipients assigned, share deleted, all the normal things you'd expect to see in a log system. I've just defined it to just a query type because I only want to see when my customers are querying. Not only that, but because I'm billing them, because I'm actually billing them, I only want to see successful queries. So the status code at equal 200. And when I run this, if the event has been written to the event log, it does take 10, 15, 20 minutes at this point for the event log, the new event log, which is in Profit Preview to keep up. We should see Maria, and there we got Maria from a bit ago. In fact, I could probably add event time to this and sort event time instead. And we'll see what the most recent one that we have access to. And these will roll in. I've never seen them miss. Sure enough, there they are. So we can see when she was using Python. And then shortly thereafter, because she switched to Power BI, in probably 5-10 minutes from now, we'll actually have a client entry from when she accessed that same credential using the Delta client Power BI client, or the Delta Sharing Power BI client. So in this case, you now have the full ability, and I can prove that to you. You now have the full ability to monetize your data. Typo. You have the full ability to monetize your data because you can now look in the log and you can see all those extra bits that we added to the client. So notice we tagged the client with some tags, and we should see that if we were to query on just the creation of just her account in the audit log, we should see where we have the usage of those tools. Or we could take a secondary query and build a small table and say, give me a list of all my recipients and all of their key value tags. And then every time I see this user ID, I'm going to look up their charge amount. We could build a very simple invoice table or a very simple monetization table. Maybe Databricks puts that in the future. Maybe they monetize with the the marketplace that we'll get to next, since it only takes a couple seconds. We'll see, but in this case, it's a short path to you monetizing. Okay, so that's it for Delta Share. We've gone through the entire sequence. I've got 8 minutes left, which is plenty of time to explore the second half of what we wanted to explore, which is exploring our data by way of the marketplace. So I'm going to come back down to my UI. Doesn't matter that I'm in this notebook. I'm going to come back down to my UI and I'm going to click Marketplace. So again, if you're not familiar, go rewatch portions of the Data and AI Summit from this year. There will be a lot of sessions on the marketplace. It's very intuitive. It's everything you'd expect in a first-class data marketplace, where lots of companies, so in this case, say ZoomInfo and AccuWeather and gosh, John Snow Labs has a bunch of healthcare data and Definitive Healthcare and CoreLogic, and boy, that just keeps going and going and going. They've all contributed to this user experience called the data marketplace. Some of it is free. Some of it requires authorization. A lot of it is just free and instant access. So I can literally get access to it right now with one click. And notice when I started this off by saying that this feature and Delta Sharing are cousins, because Delta Share is the protocol that makes the marketplace work. So let's take, I don't know, we'll find some John Snow Labs. I think we've got, this one's free. Gene Products and Targets sounds interesting. I don't know what it is, but you can read about it. And I can simply get instant access to this. I acknowledge some end user license agreement of some sort. I could hit down here and I can give it my own catalog name if I wanted to, though it's not necessary. And it's been added to my catalog by way of a Databricks to Databricks, or probably some other sharing mechanism that uses the Delta Share protocol. Doesn't matter to me, because all the work behind the scenes to build this in a catalog for me has been done. So I know that's the case because if I click catalog and I go to John Snow Labs, I can see that it picked its default catalog name that it put into my catalog was the name of the data product that I shared out of the marketplace, which is fine. and its subcategory, in this case, the topic was gene products and targets. So it built a schema or a database with, I don't know, what do we have, 6 tables here. And because now I am a Databricks to Databricks recipient, somebody else is sharing this data with me in some other environment. I don't know where it is. I can see this data as a first-class citizen. So I can see all of the metadata associated with this endogenous ligands and other peptides. Wow, that's a lot. I can see sample data, and I can see details about the data. We know it is a delta sharing table because the securable kind of this table in the details tells me that it is a delta sharing table. So that's really it. There's not a ton to the marketplace. It's a very easy experience to be in. Data are being added to the marketplace quite often, so check back. A lot of the resources are sample resources and scaled down. They offer you to perhaps buy more. That's great. That's fine. A lot of them are extremely useful. Weather forecasts, geolocating information, geospatial data. I could go on and on and on. And if you work at a company and you think that your data, net of anything that you would consider secret, can further the cause and further others in the community, by all means, share it. So, Ruthie, that is it. We are just at time, and we've accomplished everything we wanted to accomplish in this workshop.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eric. That was extremely informative, and I'm sure that all of the viewers found that very informative as well. So thank you for that. I did want to check back in to see if anyone had last minute questions. Feel free to add that into the comments. But if not, we can wrap things up. You can always email us at info@bpcs.com if you have additional questions that you'd like answered by Eric or any of our other experts. But I just wanted to thank you all for joining us. We do hope that you will join us at our expo that we have coming up. It is on intelligent lakehouse optimization, and it is one you won't want to miss. We are going to be demoing some really cool features and just something really, really great. You won't want to miss it. So I'm going to add it to the chat right on LinkedIn. You can go check out our LinkedIn page. You can go to bpcs.com to learn more. But there are so many ways that you can find out about this and register for it. So highly recommend that you sign up so that you get your spot. Once again, thank you all for joining, and a big thank you to Eric for putting all of this together. We hope you all have a great rest of your Wednesday. Bye.
Take care.